Good afternoon, everybody. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. Good to see everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about working with land sellers. And Alicia, I'm glad you're on here. You got some good stories, right? Or at least a good story.
Yeah, if you count it going off market, getting dropped twice.
So we're going to talk about the difference between selling land and selling single family residential. And to respect everybody's time, we're going to go ahead and get started. Couple things we're going to talk about, and if you was in my working with sellers class, it's pretty much the same framework, just some differences between residential and land. But the first thing that I like to emphasize, especially with land sellers, because very few people ever sell multiple parcels of land in their life. You got to set the expectations of that land, how they're going to sell that land up front, and let them know this is not selling a house. Okay, you're not going to sell it in 30 days more than likely. And there's some different items that you got to deal with when it comes to selling, and we'll talk about those a little bit more. A little bit different homework you got to do when you get into land. We're going to talk about what tools you take to your appointment and the actual appointment, and how to follow up. So pretty much this whole class is, to me, is set on setting your expectations. All right. Can everybody see my slides? I did share my slides, didn't I? Okay, just check. First, and if y'all have questions, feel free to just yell them out. Nothing formal here. First item I want to talk about, setting your expectations. Of course, first question is going to be, why is mine not moving? All right, what price you think your land's going to sell for? That's an important question, right? Because it's not too hard to figure out a general price on a single family residential property, right? Anymore, not that hard. At least get in the ballpark. With land, man, it is all over the board, left, right, up, down. I mean, people have no clue how to do that. So that's homework that you've got to do. That's something you need to bring to the table as an expert. Here are the comps in your area for the land that you have. I mean, now you're talking about what size of land it is and how to compare it. You're talking about, is it level? Level is important because level means it's cheaper. All right, it's cheaper to clear, I should say. Probably get more for it if it's level too. It's cheaper for whoever owns it to clear it off. Has it been cleared? All the trees taken out, stumps ground out of the way, pulled up. That makes it more valuable for the person that owns the property. Has any of that been done? What's the topography of the land? Is it up? Is it down? Is it near a floodplain? Is there a stream running through it? All those different things can factor into value. So make sure you know what those factors are. Alicia, am I missing anything else?
That if it'll perk.
Yeah, right.
Or if you're
that's a great, thank you for bringing that up, Alicia. Thank you, because most landowners don't have a perk test on record for their property. And if you do, now we're talking smaller pieces of land. If you do, that makes it more valuable. If the buyer knows they're not going to have to do that work and that the property does perk, that's taken off the buyer's plate. That makes life a whole lot easier for the buyers. And now we're assuming that the buyers and the sellers are looking for apples and apples, right? So the buyer wants to buy the land to put a single family home on. If the land perks for 3 bedrooms, then we hope that that's what the buyer is looking for, right? So all those things add to value. Any questions on that? Because I could go on this line for a little bit longer if you need to. Any other questions on?
We're still on number 1. What price are you thinking of leasing your land?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I listed some land with Sherry Argabright on Dale Earnhardt Boulevard, commercial land. Completely different story. Completely different story now. Now we're doing comparables for commercial land. MLS is not necessarily the best place to do that. So how do you get true comparables for commercial land? You got to look on a commercial site. What they thought it was worth up here, what we actually comped it out at is right here. And guess what? That gap right there equals about 2 years of sitting on the market, because my folks still think it's worth all this. I got some more land listed on Concord Lake Road. I showed him clear and concise comps. That land was easy to comp because of everything around it. He's like, well, if you don't start up here, you're never going to get it. I understand that. I hear that all the time. Guess what? 4 months later, we're still sitting up here. We're still sitting on the market. So knowing how to do a comp for land, whether it's commercial, whether it's residential, make sure you do that. Make sure you have your ammunition. So when you go to set those expectations, you're not arguing with somebody that says, well, I know I can sell it for X. Well, no, Mr. Seller, my paper right here says you can't. And of course you got to be nicer than that, but make sure you have your ammunition. Here's what your land can be used for. So if you're looking to, if the seller's looking to sell it to a developer, is that even possible? Is it allowed? Is the municipality going to allow it? Is there water and sewer nearby? You know, those are things you got to do your homework on, figure it out. If there are, is a municipality even looking to allow more single family residential? Because in Cabarrus County, my guess is that's the answer to that is no, because we have a sewer capacity issue. So you got to know those things. If it's commercial, now you're talking about a whole different conversation, right? So my seller out on Lake Concord Road, he's at a great location because it's right at a signalized intersection. However, that whole area is zoned residential and OI, which is office institution. So if they want to put a Walgreens there, city says you can't do it. So understanding what you can put there, and that's a simple phone call to the local planning office. That's easy. That's an easy conversation. Those folks, especially I can tell you in Kannapolis or Rowan County, they're more than happy to help you. That's what they're there for. That's what your tax money pays them for, to help them, to help you understand that. How long do you think your land's going to be under contract? Alicia, would you like to expound on this one?
Well, the first time it was right at a year before our due diligence was ending and we fell out. Went back under not long after. Right before due diligence went, almost 6 months, it fell out. So if you're getting with anybody that's going to do multiple lots, it's going to take a year.
Right. A great point. If your seller thinks they want to sell to a developer, or if they want to sell to a commercial developer, they need to realize this ain't no 3-week due diligence process, okay? Not even close. That buyer is going to want to go through all of the government processes and all the government hoops before they even take title to the land. Did you get any due diligence money during that time, Alicia?
Not a thing. We did get the work that they put into it, the first builder, not the second, but neither any due diligence money.
So that's my fourth point. Due diligence money typically doesn't apply to developers, folks. They're not going to pay you money. Okay, the reason being they got a ton of work, don't they, Alicia?
They sure do.
They got a ton of work to do with environmental studies and talking to the planning department and getting their plans approved, getting those zoning approvals, all kinds of approvals, which could take 4 to 6 months. I imagine the people that had it under contract for you, was that Meritage?
Smith Douglas and
Smith
then
Douglas, right,
Press
right.
Pro. Yeah,
Yeah, I imagine they spent
a ton of money.
tens of thousands of dollars doing their work. They're not going to pay your seller due diligence money. That's an expectation you got to set. Now
Mhm.
you got to have the conversation of, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, your land is going to be under contract for 6 months. So that means nobody else is going to look at it probably. And you're not getting a dime for that.
Not a thing.
A lot of people have a hard time with that
Mhm.
because they're so used to the way we do single family residential. Okay, but you got to have that conversation. Any questions so far? All right. What will the buyer do during due diligence? Depending on what you're going to have done, what the buyer's plans are. If they're going to do a subdivision, they're probably going to do an environmental study, at least the phase 1, which is going to point out any kind of environmental issues. Commercially, they're going to do a phase 1 to make sure there's no environmental traps they're sitting on. And what I mean is, if you're got land anywhere around downtown Kannapolis that you want to do commercial on, there's a good chance if Cannon Mills ever owned it, they dump something on that property.
Hmm.
They dump something on it. So you got to be careful to make sure you're not buying an old dump site that now the EPA says you have to clean up.
Wow.
That's another expense, right? They're going to dig. I doubt they're going to dig enough to mess your land up, but you do need to let them know there are going to be people out there digging, right? They're going to make sure it can perk if that's the way they want to go. Doing other kinds of environmental things. So setting expectations again, folks, what we're talking about. Here's another conversation you need to have with your sellers. Is your land part of the forestry program or the farming program? Now, what that is owners of land can get major tax deductions if their land is part of this forestry program. And don't ask me to explain it. It just means you won't build on it. You'll leave it as forestry part of the program, undeveloped land, right?
Mhm.
Or you're going to use it as farming. The problem with that is when you go to sell it, this is happening on our Dale Earnhardt Boulevard property I have with Sherry Argelbright. They are part of a farming program, which means the owner pays almost no taxes every year, which is great for them. But when they go to sell it, they've got to pay, the seller has to pay 4 years of back taxes and the current year's taxes. If they choose not to continue being in the farming or the forestry program. So anybody buying land on Dale Earnhardt Boulevard is not going to stay in any kind of forestry program, right? They're going to put residential, they're going to put commercial on. That burden goes back to the seller. For Dale Earnhardt Boulevard, that was around $56,000 that they would have to come up with. So that's something you need to let your sellers know. Ask them, they'll tell you if it's in a forestry program, they should know. Or you can call the county and find out easy. Very easy. I actually called Cabarrus County, or Sherry called Cabarrus County about the Dale Earnhardt Boulevard land. And they told her just like that. Yes, it's in it, and here's how much they would have to pay.
Chris, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Oh, there's
Hey.
Sherry. Hey, Sherry.
I'm glad you didn't say anything bad about me.
Me too. I wrote myself a note not to.
Wasn't that specifically because they were going to be breaking it? That consideration, that what we found out was if they sold the 2 acres across the street separate and left the 10 in, or vice versa. I believe it was, they sold the 10 and didn't sell the 2, then the 2 would have to pay the backpack tax.
Yeah, that one. So that one was a little bit different because it's split between 2 different. It's the same parcel, ain't it, Sherry? It's just
It
the road
is, it
split
just
in
has
half.
the Del Earnhardt Boulevard running through it as
Well, it didn't really split in half, but you got 2 acres on one side, 10 on the other. So it was a little bit different. Yeah.
But if they sold, I guess this is for clarification, if they sold it all at once, they wouldn't be required to pay all those back taxes. That was my understanding. Maybe I need to.
I don't know. I have to get clarification on that because I'm not
Okay.
sure. They're still
I thought
coming
it
out of
had-
the program, you know?
Okay, I was thinking it was because whatever stayed, didn't get sold, if they opted to sell those 2 parcels separately or to break it up, that the one that stayed behind would no longer qualify for
Right.
the program, and so it would be coming out, and so they would have to pay all the taxes on that
Okay.
remaining parcel.
Right. Right.
But I'll call and check on that just for further
All right.
clarification.
I had another piece of property that we were going to buy, and if you know where 5 Points is in China Grove, it was right off of 5 Points near Brown Road. I think it was 13 acres. We were going to buy it and try to develop it, and it was in the farm program. And we asked the seller if they were in any kind of program, and they told us. So I called the Rowan County, I believe it's the tax assessor's office, and she said, yeah, you're going to have to pay, I believe it was about $32,000. So we're like, we can negotiate around that, and that may not be a problem, but it's
Well-
not something you want to discover after you get the bill.
No, Chris, one of the ones I sold on Trinity Church was in the forestry program. My seller was willing to pay, but the buyer was willing to stay in the forestry program. So they just had to do the paperwork to stay in.
But again, it's good to know that up front, right? You don't want to have that
Mhm.
conversation when the bill comes out.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, that makes you look worse. So thank you for that. How are you going to advertise the property? Are you advertising it for one person to build on? Or are you advertising it for a developer to build on? If you're advertising for a developer, your best bet's probably not the MLS. Now, there are developers out there looking on the MLS to get it faster and to get it to more developers. You got to go outside of our Canopy MLS. There are commercial websites like LoopNet and CoStar and Crexy that you can join. Now, they're expensive, but you can join them, and they'll give you a lot faster exposure to the right people that want sizable tracts of land. So let your sellers know, hey, I'm not your typical agent. I'm not just going to stick a sign, one of my little, what are signs, 2x4s in the ground, and then no, they're not even 4 feet. 1x2s, I'm not going to stick those in the ground and stick it on MLS. Be a little bit more professional. If you're going to have a big tract of land, you need to have a big 4x4 sign so people riding by at 45 or 55 miles an hour can actually see it. Okay. Let your sellers know those things. Let your sellers know that separates you from Uncle Junebug down the street that just got his real estate license. Okay. Any questions on this slide? All right. Your homework. What are you going to do? You got to pull the deed. And if you don't know how to do that, you can do that through the local or the county GIS site. But you got to make sure the people selling the property are the ones that actually own the property. Kind of important. I did have an example. I think I said it in last class. One of my business partners from our old firm, she and I worked together on everything. And she had somebody call her and said, hey, I need you to sell this property. And she's like, cool, yeah, we're glad to. So she was doing her homework and ended up the guy calling her was not the person on the deed. And so what she found out was the person on the deed was the mother. The guy calling her was her son, who she was allowing to live in the property. He was trying to sell it out from under her. So same thing with farmland. Make sure you do your homework and know who owns the property. Look up the zoning. Okay, look up the zoning and find out what is allowed on that property. You can do that on the county GIS site, or you can call the local planning board or planning department, and they're going to tell you folks, they're really, really helpful. Very, very helpful. So, and then part of your homework, find out if they're in the forestry program, call the county tax office to see if there's any implications with the sale. All righty. So you got your appointment, you're ready to go. What are you going to take with you? I'm going to take a notebook and my laptop. I'm going to make sure I got all my paperwork filled out. I'm a touchy-feely type person, so I need paper in my hand, right? I don't want to send somebody a 13-page listing agreement via email for them to sign, because I want to make darn sure that they understand what they're signing. Okay. First thing you better get signed is that working with real estate agent. I shouldn't have to repeat myself, but yeah, make sure you get that signed first. Okay. If you do send it through Dotloop, make sure you send working with real estates first, because they are time stamped. If the commission sees a listing agreement signed before working with real estates, you're going to be in trouble. And God, please don't do this when you get an offer with a buyer. Now, I know we're talking something different here, but especially coming through COVID as fast and as furious as we were working, I know a lot of people would send the working with real estate, the buyer agency agreement, and offer to purchase at the same time. So what's a buyer going to sign first? What is a buyer looking for?
The offer.
The offer, right? Now you got the offer signed first. You may get the working with real estate signed if they even understand what it is. So make sure you get that signed first. Listing agreement disclosures and your MLS info sheet. Your MLS info sheet is going to give you everything you need to have, put it in the MLS, and not get any of those annoying little red exclamation points on your list. And then I put a sign and of course a camera. Now for large tracts of land, I'm not going to order my 4x4 sign until I get a listing agreement, because those things are expensive.
Mhm.
They can run you $250 to $300. I know Broom Sign and Concord will run you about that much, but they'll go install them for you, so you're not out there with post hole diggers digging holes. I say a camera. I think the best way to do large tracts of land is to get someone that's licensed to operate a drone
Mhm.
and get an aerial photo of it. And if you use somebody like Next Door Photography, they can actually lay out lot lines on the parcels for you. So when you put it in the MLS, the buyer sees this is what it looks like, and here's the lot lines for it. Or I don't want to say the lot lines, but it's laid out what should be the lot lines. It's not, obviously it's not a survey.
Hey, Chris,
Yes, ma'am.
that Lighthouse folks, they do that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I like Jordan.
Yeah.
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 That's who we used on Dale Earnhardt.
Yeah, he's good too. Yep. All right, any questions on your toolbox? All righty. Your appointment. Build your rapport with your people, okay? I have a tough time with that. If you came to our DISC profile class, not a class, but Liz taught us our DISC profile on our think tank on Wednesday. It teaches you how to interact, different personality styles interacts with other personality styles or maybe clashing personality styles. And I am a strong-willed person with likes everything in order kind of person. And a lot of people these days are influencer kind of people. I don't get along with those people traditionally, so I got to learn to talk to them. So work on your rapport, get your rapport. You're setting your expectations, you're talking to them, making them feel warm and fuzzy. Now, most of you on here have great personalities. Y'all don't have anything to worry about. I got to work on my conversations because I'm not warm and fuzzy, rainbow and unicorns like y'all are. Go over your working with real estate. Make sure you revisit those expectations, okay? That's one of the things that will save you a lot of angst later on in the listing or the transaction if you've already went over these expectations, folks. Go over your paperwork. Make sure you walk the land. Walk the land. What if my old instructor at Superior, when I got my license, she had some land up in Morganton and she was walking it. And she said she came around the corner and looked in the field and she asked the guy, she's like, what is that big bulge in the land over there? He's like, oh, I buried a bus over there. Who buries a bus? I hope there's no kids in it, right? I guess there wasn't. So it wasn't in the newspaper. So that's a material fact. There is a bus buried on this property, right? So you need to know those things. What's your marketing plan? Land, you can't stick a sign in the ground, stick it in the MLS and pray that it sells, right? Can't do that. You got to have a plan. You got, if you know people, if you know developers, you know builders, you know somebody looking to build a house on a piece of land, make sure your seller knows that. Okay, make sure they know that. Then how are you going to follow up with them? My single family residential people, I like to follow up with them weekly just to let them know what's going on. Or if there's houses still listed, what happened, what kind of activity do we have with your house? What's the market doing around your house? You don't need to do it that often with land. Land doesn't sell that quickly, right? So how often do you want me to contact you? What form do you want me to contact you? Can I text you? God, I hope so, because I hate calling people. I really do. Can I text you? You want an email? You want a phone call? Tell me what's the best way to do that. And what time can I follow up with you on? Any questions on the appointment? Now, one of the things, and I'm kind of going off topic here, and Sherry can attest to this, you need to follow up with your sellers, especially on land when things change in the market. And I'm not talking about property selling. As soon as Sherry and I listed that Dale Earnhardt Boulevard property, what happened? Interest rates started going up. Kannapolis ran out of sewer capacity magically somehow. That happened first, then next thing you know, interest rates start going up. So no sewer capacity means that residential building is going to be severely restricted. That hurts. Interest rates going up means commercial development's going to slow down. That hurts too. All those things bring the price of that land down. Our sellers hadn't figured that out yet. Have
We're
they, Sherry?
working on them. We're
We're working
them.
on it. It's been a long 2-year process, but we're working on them. But you got to keep them abreast of those things. They don't know what interest rate changes does to a land market. Most people don't even know there's a sewer capacity issue in Cabarrus County. They have no idea. My seller on Lake Concord Road, they're building apartments right behind him. Literally, they're putting in a new road to go to those apartments. And they bought some of his land to do that. So in his mind, he's thinking maybe I can sell it to a developer, build more apartments on it, right? Probably not. Those apartments that went back there were approved before Kannapolis realized they had a sewer capacity issue. They already had their what they call an allotment. And I went to lunch with the city public works director and the planning director a few months ago, and they told me, they said, we are not prioritizing any residential developments anymore, all commercial. So remember, I told you on that land zone, office, institutional, and residential. Well, residential's out of the picture. So now it's going to be office. What does that do to the price of the land? It brings it down, right? Do you think we have a lot of office space in Kannapolis open? Way more than we got residential space. Okay, so the likelihood of somebody building an office building there is small, really, really small. Those are things you got to keep up with when you're doing your follow-ups. Any questions on the appointment? All right. Working with real estates, this is something y'all should know by now, but make sure you explain it. Just tell them it's not a contract, folks. I just have to do this because the real estate commission says I do. I'm just explaining your options. That's it. What do you do if they won't sign it?
I write on it that they refuse to sign.
I was going to say slap them in the head and give them a pen. But yeah, you
I'll
write
go
on
with
it that they
Alicia.
do what?
I said, I'll go with Alicia.
All right, fine. Write on it and say that they won't sign. That's all you got to do, folks. But you got to do it. Make sure you're doing it. Couple things about revisiting expectations, and we talk about this, and that was the whole theme of this, really, this class. Revisit the timing. Selling land's different, completely different time frame. What are showings going to look like? Typically, people don't care when you're walking on their land, but they like to know you're walking on their land, right? You walk on somebody's land in the wrong part of the county, you may get some buckshot in your rear end, right? So yeah, let them know how they're going to handle showings and who may be there. What are offers going to look like? Let them know you're not getting due diligence money more than likely on a land deal. You're just not. Talk about negotiating, talk about due diligence and how closing can go. Closing on land is not much different than closing on single family residential. But again, most people don't do this multiple times a year. They don't know what to expect. Okay, set those expectations. Listing agreement, make sure you go over that in detail with them. One of the things we talked about in our DISC profile class, you come across somebody that is like me, that is a high D and high C when it comes to the DISC profile, they're going to want you to explain every line of it. And you better know it, or you're going to look like a fool, right? You're going to look like you don't know what you're doing. The other thing I want to bring up, and I should have put this in there, make sure you use the right paperwork. You don't use the the 101 exclusive right to sell listing agreement. That's for residential property. Use the vacant land listing agreement. Make sure you use the right paperwork. Do you need to use the residential property owners association disclosure with raw land? Or with land, I should say. Nah, you don't need to use that. There's nothing to disclose. It's land, right? Unless you got a house on. The only thing you need is the mineral oil and gas disclosure. Any questions so far on what we talked about?
Chris,
Mhm.
can you address times that it would be appropriate to use the commercial listing agreement? When it's land like the Dell Earnhardt property that we're marketing it as commercial and the structures of no value, not marketing it with the house.
Did we use commercial on it?
We did.
I think if the property is zoned for commercial, you use commercial listing agreement. If it's zoned for residential, you use a vacant land. I think that's 103.
Okay, yeah, then that's why we went commercial then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, don't assume that I got 10 acres that's zoned residential that I'm gonna get it commercial, so I'm gonna use the commercial listing agreement.
Thank you.
That's a good point. Thanks, Sherry.
Chris, did you say
Yes.
no due diligence money for the land, for residential land as well?
Sabine, let me start again. Typically, you don't see due diligence money for people buying raw land, and that's because they've got so many hoops to jump through with government approvals and environmental tests and those things. Typically, you don't see it. If you get one of the big home builders like Alicia was talking about, Smith Douglas, Meritage, DR Horton, they're not going to pay you a dime in due diligence money. And it's because they got so much stuff, so much money they've already got to spend it. They're not going to pay you anything.
Is the same for residential land or individuals?
I don't know. I'd be interested to see what you, Alicia and Sherry, have to say on residential land. If they're just going to build one house on it, I still don't think I've seen any due diligence money. Have y'all? Not much.
I
At a
have,
minimum,
yeah, very small.
Very small. Yeah.
yeah, I try to go, I almost always, I'm working as a buyer agent. I'll go in with 0 and often they will come back with 200 or 300, maybe 500. And just depends on if, I'll usually say, well, my buyer considers their septic permit application fee, they're part of their due diligence monies. That's monies they're
Yeah,
spending.
That's a good point, Sherry. So if the buyer has to get a septic permit,
Perk test done.
that's money. Yeah, the perk test, that's money out of their pocket, but that's a material fact now that the seller can use if the buyer walks away. And that's a material fact they can use to market their property.
Unless it doesn't perk, then that's
Unless it
bad.
doesn't perk, then then
Yeah.
then the value of it start going, right?
Yeah, now when everything was so hot last year, and we actually bought my husband's construction company, we bought a lot. And then I was working with a couple of investors that were building and they were buying lots. And we did go in with a due diligence, but again, it was minimal. I think 500 on them or something like that, if I remember correctly, just because it was competitive and,
That's probably commensurate to residential people going in with 10,000.
right.
That's
what I was thinking.
Right? Probably the same thing.
Yeah. But I'm like you, usually I try to go in with 0 and
Yeah.
unless they just, counter back and my buyers are in agreement with it.
Alicia, have you seen any due diligence money?
Just very low, like 250-ish,
Okay,
more with like the earnest money, but it was well down the road, so.
okay. Good points, good points. All right, we're
you.
talking about, I'm sorry, somebody have a question?
No, yes, sir, thank you.
Oh, yes, ma'am, no problem. We talked about your marketing plan, how you're gonna market the property. MLS, you're gonna use a 4x4 sign so people can read it going 55 miles an hour down the road, kind of thing. How else are you gonna market it? Who are you gonna market it to?
My second time around with that piece of property, I pulled the buyers out of the Charlotte Builders Association and sent them handwritten envelopes with letters giving them information about that property. That's how I got the
love it.
second buyer.
I love it. That's something that sets you apart from other listing agents,
Yeah,
right?
but
'Cause
now I have nothing new.
I guarantee you there's not a lot of people out there doing that. Are you a member of one of those websites, LoopNet or Crexi that I mentioned? Are you spending money out of your own pocket right now to be a part of those websites that set you apart, that get you in front of the right eyeballs, right? Do you know developers? Do you know builders? People, local people like Press Pro or Niblock or those guys. Maybe you can use your connections to help out there. All right, follow up. We talked about this. What's the best way to contact you? What's the best time to contact you? How often you want me to contact you? And then we're going to talk about adjustments, because Mr. Seller on Concord Lake Road, remember when you started way up here? And remember I told you your property wasn't worth that? We're going to bring it down. I'm still having that conversation though. That ain't always an easy conversation, and they have selective memory sometimes. But let them know, look, if this thing doesn't sell, it does me no good to have a $250 4x4 sign on Concord Lake Road that's sitting there being weather worn, right? I want to sell the darn thing. So what's your ahas from this class? What's your thoughts on working with land sellers?
Everybody's quiet.
I wasn't aware of the due diligence not being a part of it. Like, that's a completely different process. I haven't worked with any sellers, residential or commercial. So, I mean, it's obviously all gonna be new to me, but yeah, I didn't know that that was a thing. No due diligence. Or
Yeah.
due diligence.
Again, Megan, everything's negotiable, right? So I'd never say never, but
Right.
typically it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
that's
it seems kind of like risky, I guess, or not risky, but kind of scary, because you don't know what the land will do, what you can't, you
Yeah.
know, obviously you get through zoning and you learn that much, but there's so much more than just.
oh gosh. Yeah, think about Alicia's poor old people that had it under contract for a year and a half combined.
Yeah, I'm
And they
really
didn't get
good
a
friends
dime.
I wanted
with
to ask
Faith now.
too, it was under contract for a year and a half. That's
With two different builders. The first one, we made it almost a solid year before their due diligence was over. And then they backed out like the day before. But we got all the stuff from what they worked on. So I had all that to share with the next round. And then Press Pro went under, and they were maybe 6 months, and then they backed out.
So is
But
it typical to be under contract for 6 months to a year for land? That's a
For-
typical
for-
time frame.
Mine
Yeah.
were developers, so yeah.
So when you're
Um,
writing up the listing agreement or even the offer, like how long do I put in the offer for my due diligence period?
I put an inspection period, and I'm going to put at least 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we knew up front it was gonna be a long time.
Yeah.
The first one, they weren't real thrilled about it, but by the time we got to the second one, they were just happy it was under contract again.
Yeah.
And I've become really good friends with the people in the town of Faith.
I bet. Well, that's interesting.
Now, I remember, Alicia, when we were listing that, they did not like the fact that their property is going to go off the market and not get a dime
No.
for it.
No,
They
they were
didn't
not
like that.
happy. No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that took some massaging on Alicia's part to get them over that hump.
They were not happy, but now
Yeah.
they're just like, okay, that's fine. Can we get a little something? So the paperwork was good, but
Yeah.
yeah, bring me a
Well, I
buyer, I'll be
had-
happy.
I learned this morning, just reiterating what you were saying about review and revisit and go ahead and lay out your expectations in the very beginning. That way, when those situations do come, it's a little easier to have those conversations with the seller.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Plus, I talked to my sellers like bi-weekly during that whole thing, just to let them know what I was finding out from the developers. So they knew what was going on.
And Alicia,
Mhm.
what were some of the reasons for the builder to back the contract?
Okay, the biggest part was, and they knew it going in, we told them, Faith requires a 20,000 square foot property, basically half-acre lots. They both went into it, and by the end, they were like, but we need a smaller lot, because they were gonna have to put the infrastructure in first, the sewer and the water, and then Faith will maintain it. They knew all this up front because they had talked to Faith, and Faith is very plain on what they require. They must have thought they could convince them to reduce lot size. Faith will not reduce lot size.
Tell them, welcome to Rowan County.
Yes. So, I told them both. They both did not believe me.
So I put my first question up second and my second one up first, but what are some benefits of working with land sellers?
Hmm.
You don't have to worry about a condition of a home.
Yeah.
There you go. It's probably less liability, right?
Yeah.
The main one I was thinking of is you typically make more than 3% on it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We need to tell
my-
we need to tell some agents that, though.
I know we do.
I'm
Yeah.
seeing
Now,
more and more
I'm-
at 3%.
I mean, Alicia told you what kind of work she put into hers. My land on Lake Concord, if it ever sells, I'm going to make 4% on. So there's a lot more, if you're truly going to sell it and market it, there's a lot more work that goes into it than just
Taking
sticking a sign in
pictures.
front.
Mhm.
What's your biggest challenges, you think?
All the hoops that you have to go through to get it sold.
Yep. All the hoops.
Mhm.
I'll be honest, I do not, if I list land, I just don't plan on it to sell. I don't plan on ever collecting that commission, and if it does, praise the Lord, right? But I don't plan on it. And most of the times it will sell if they hadn't priced it too high or something extraneous happens, like Kannapolis runs out of sewer capacity and interest rates are raised, Sherry, you got to admit, we'd have had that land sold if we had sewer capacity.
Yep, I think so. Or if we could have put storage units on the 10-acre tract.
I would have bought it then.
I know, that's what my
Yeah.
husband was saying.
Yeah,
Get them to reduce that price. Let's buy it.
yeah. So it can be challenging, but it can be, if you specialize in it, it could be a lot less stressful. There's a lot less, I think a lot less emotions that go into it. Now, when I'm talking land, I'm talking bigger tracts, right? Not single family individual pieces of land, but bigger pieces of land or commercial land. There's a lot less emotions that go into it. And Alicia was talking about Smith Douglas knew they had to get a certain number of lots out of it, right?
Mhm.
That's a math problem. That's not an emotional problem.
Mm-mm.
I like those better than emotional problems. I can solve a math problem. I'm not Dr. Phil, right? I'm not Dr. Phil, so. Anybody got any questions or comments? That's all I got.
Chris, was wondering with the sewer capacity problem that the city of Kannapolis is having, do you know what kind of solution they can have to that in the future?
What kind of what? Sabine, say that one more time.
What kind of solution they will have to fix that in the future?
I will tell you the official statement is and this is Cabarrus County, this isn't just Kannapolis. So they are expanding the sewer plant on Rocky River in 2024 to add capacity. And then they have another expansion planned in 2027 to add capacity. However, the real story is all of that additional capacity has already been promised to people that got developments planned. So I don't know if we have a long-term solution. Sherry, I heard you giggle. What's your thoughts?
Well, I giggle just because of what you just shared is what I was aware of, the 24 and 27 years. And so I don't feel like that is an immediate solution. I have heard, and have you heard about this, Chris, or any of the rest of you heard this, how some, if the water sewer is already there on a particular property, then you shouldn't have a problem with, getting a building permit and building a single family residential, and that there are some builders that are buying up the old homes and demolishing in them and building new construction right in the same spot.
Yeah, I think the rule that Kannapolis has is if it's 2 acres, you can put 3 houses on it. No more. They'll give you capacity for that. If you just have a small lot on Main Street that's already platted, cut out, they'll let you build 1 house on. The problem you run into is when you're talking about developing multiple houses on.
Right.
Yeah. But all of the development downtown Kannapolis, somehow they magically already have capacity. And all that's coming from 2024 and 2027. So that's just, I don't know what Concord and Harrisburg and those folks are doing. I'm just telling you about Kannapolis.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I have a question. I don't know if it was Alicia that was saying that some people will buy older houses and tear them down and build new one on them. So what would the age of a house be? The original or the new?
Sherry, was
say
that you? Are they buying?
Yeah, I would say it would be new, Sabine, because your building, the age of the home is based on your building permit.
Okay.
So when they would
Oh,
get a
okay.
building permit to build the new home, that would be, the age of the home would be the year the building permit was issued.
Oh, okay. Thank
That
you.
makes sense. That's a good question, Sabine. All right, any other questions? Very cool. Well, that was good discussion, folks. Thank y'all for your input and I appreciate it. And this was recorded, so we will send out the recording probably sometime tomorrow. So
Thank you,
thank y'all
Chris.
very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Chris.
y'all.
Y'all have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
Have a good
Have a
one.
good one.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone have a good one.